This video is sponsored by the Cascade Clash, a 3-day 150-player major-level Warhammer 40k tournament with a focus on competition and a smooth experience for competitive players. More about them later on in the video. What's up, folks? Welcome back to Tactical Tortoise. My name is Trevi, and this is another installment of Best Armies in 40k. This is the video series where we go through the last weekend's results and talk about undefeated lists. And we've got a pretty exciting weekend because it was Las Vegas Open 2024. Now, Las Vegas Open is the largest event of the year and kind of the capstone to the ITC International Tournament Circuit, and usually crowns a winner for the ITC. Now, I have two videos elsewhere on the channel discussing LVO 2024, so I'm not going to be talking too much about it in this video. You can hear me break down the winning list and all of their games in my video that I published yesterday, and I talked further about the top 8 lists on Sunday, which had some insane results. We saw things like Unending Swarm Tyranids and Astra Militarum Super Heavies go undefeated going on into day 3. Absolutely insane. I think the focus this weekend was very much on LVO, so we didn't have quite the volume of events that we normally see, but what we will be doing is diving into all of the lists that went undefeated from those other events. So let's get into it with a metagame breakdown. Like I said, not too many results to talk about this time around, but we did see continued strong showing from Necrons, who went undefeated at the Dutch Masters finale, as well as the Las Vegas Open 40k Championships. On top of that, Adeptus Sororitas also had an insanely good weekend, taking down Leviathan Season 2 as well as the Peterborough Slam. Now, speaking of that Peterborough Slam, we also had in second place an undefeated list with a single draw on their record, so they tied in one of their games with Leagues of Votann. Moving on, NMN 40k was won by Death Guard, and last but certainly not least, the Astra Militarum train continues at the 40k Brawl, which saw the Imperial Guard go undefeated. Pretty exciting results for the weekend. Let's talk about the lists that went undefeated. But first, sponsor time. With the new year and the new competitive Warhammer 40k season comes a deluge of competitive events. A veritable waterfall of them. One could even call it a cascade. And one of the best of them is the Cascade Clash. Cascade Clash is a new competitively focused tabletop gaming convention held March 8th through 10th in Mount Vernon, Washington, and is presented by Aegis Games. While the event holds a variety of competitive gaming tournaments, we're here to talk about Warhammer. The highlight of the Cascade Clash is a 3-day, 8-round, 150-player Warhammer 40k major. The event is being organized by an experienced judge team drawn from successful competitive Warhammer 40k players. And they formulated a packet specifically to alleviate many of the pain points experienced by other large events in the field. And they're also offering a frankly ludicrous amount of prize support. This includes prizes for best painting and best overall, best sportsman, best in faction, and even best in record. The event is being held on the Skagit County Fairgrounds with pretty reasonable travel distance from both SeaTac and Bellingham Airport, and includes a shuttle service from SeaTac if you're flying in. So there's many options to travel to the event. So follow the links down in the pinned comment and video description for more information about the Cascade Clash and the Warhammer 40k major being held there. Don't forget to mark your calendars March 8th through 10th and get ready for the Clash. Now, LVO was won by Matt Laura, and as I said before, I did do a very deep breakdown into Matt's Hypercrypt Legion list yesterday. So if you want a full deep dive into this list, go ahead and check that out. But as a little bit of a 1,000-yard view, the list was focused on the synergies between Chronomancers, Immortals, and the Necron Monolith. The Monolith has Deep Strike built in innately, allowing it to hyperphase around the table on the first turn. It can then use it to Eternity Gate to bring in Immortals, and use the Chronomancer's ability to let the Immortals move after they fire. That gives the list a lot of mobility and a ton of objective grabbing. It's able to play tactical objectives extremely well with easy access using Cosmic Precision to basically any objective on the table with a unit of OC2 Immortals that get wound rerolls when you're on an objective. These guys do a lot of damage and are incredibly difficult to stop stealing your objectives away, and that gives the list absolutely insane abilities to score victory points. Now that said, that wasn't the only Necron list that we saw go undefeated this weekend, because at the Dutch Masters finale, we saw Peter Meyer go undefeated with a different version variety of Necrons. Peter was running the Canoptek Court, the other super strong detachment out of the new Necrons Codex. This detachment gives you hit rerolls on your Canoptek and Cryptek units if you control the majority of objectives in your area or are within your own deployment zone. As long as you do so, you get an effect called Power Matrix, which allows you to get those hit rerolls as long as you remain wholly within your Power Matrix. Now, this list was focused extremely heavily on Canoptek units. A couple of weeks before, we saw Immortals brought very heavily in this detachment, but unfortunately, the recent FAQ made Immortals much less useful within the Canoptek Corps because they're not able to gain devastating wounds from their stratagem. However, there are no such restrictions on the Canoptek unit, so this list had removed all of the Immortals from the army in order to focus on the namesake unit archetype, which still get all of the benefits of stratagems and other synergies within the detachment. This list was running 2 Catan shards, a Transcendent Catan as well as a shard of the Nightbringer, alongside 3 Technomancers, one of them with the Dimensional Sanctum to allow his unit to forward deploy with infiltrators. Backing that up, we then had 3 units of Canoptek Wraiths for those Technomancers to jump into and provide their Feel No Pain. We had 3 Canoptek Doomstalkers to add some relatively reliable backline shooting at a very cheap points value, thanks to the rerolls granted by that Power Matrix, alongside 3 individual Locust Destroyers, a unit of Tomb Blades, and a unit of Canoptek Scarab Swarms to act as utility. With the stratagems available to Canoptek Court, while these units aren't the heaviest hitting in the game, they are extremely difficult to engage with, either getting lone operative or reactive moves when enemies come close. That can make it very difficult to engage them in melee profitably or shoot them off objectives, and again, makes this army incredibly efficient at scoring. Honestly, it's cool to see both archetypes of Necron still see some play, because I know that there was a little bit of concern that Canoptek Court would fall off once it received its nerf, and Hypercrypt Legion would be the only detachment that Necrons were playing. But that's not exactly what happened, and it's cool to see multiple very different styles of Necron army come to the fore. Now, let's move on to the next faction that we had undefeated, that being Adepta Sororitas, who had 2 results. The first one at the Leviathan Season 2 RTT was won 5-0 by Riley Tremblay. Riley's list included a Dialogus, Palatine, and the Triumph of St. Catherine to assemble the Wombo combo to allow their Miracle Dice to go as far as possible. The Triumph of St. Catherine allows a unit within 6 inches to perform multiple Acts of Faith, allowing you to use multiple Miracle Dice on them. Each of those Acts of Faith then gets converted into an automatic 6 thanks to the Dialogus attached to the unit, and if the Palatine is also in that unit, those hit rolls that are automatic 6s when a Miracle Dice is used automatically convert into lethal hits, which then automatically wound. If you have a couple extra dice to use on damage rolls, you can also automatically 6 your damage rolls, making multi-damage things like multi-meltas absolutely lethal with this combo. We then had Morven Vol to lead a unit of 3 Paragon Warsuits to grant them rerolls as well, and try to get as much damage out of these multi-meltas as possible. While the Adepta Sororitas army doesn't have a ton of firepower, these combos are the way that it reliably kills heavily armored units. We then had a unit of Battle Sisters, 2 Sororitas Rhinos, as well as 3 units of Arcoflagellants, 2 Castigators with battle cannons to add a little bit of long-range firepower, 3 Crusader units in order to perform secondaries very efficiently, 2 Exorcists for indirect fire, and 2 Seraphim squads for their ability to deep strike, shoot, and then move to steal objectives, clear enemy infantry, and just act as very useful utility units. This is a classic composition of Adepta Sororitas, focusing on the relative resilience of their very efficient armor, plus using all those combos to try to be able to break enemy armor and win the attritional battle. Now, Adepta Sororitas continued to powerhouse this week with 2 undefeated results, moving over to the Peterborough Slam. Jack Tite, a previous T5S2 Invitational finalist over on my competitive series online, took the faction to an undefeated record. This list had an even heavier reliance on the combination that I discussed earlier, with 2 Palatines and 2 Dialogus to grant their ability to flip Miracle Dice of any facing into automatic wounds, thanks to the Triumph of St. Catherine standing nearby. We also had Morven Vol in this list as well to lead a unit of Paragon Warsuits, and saw some other similarities. The army had 2 Battle Sister squads to make use of those combos, an Immolator as well as a Rhino, 3 units of Arcoflagellants, and 3 Castigator. The big difference between these 2 lists is that Jack's army elected to remove the Exorcist for additional Castigators, as well as only 1 Crusader squad rather than the 3 we saw in Riley's list, and 2 Seraphim squad to make up some objective holders as well. 2 very similar builds of Adepta Adeptus Sororitas, definitely relying heavily on those combos and that heavy armor, as well as Arcoflagellants, obviously, but clearly it is a composition that's working for the faction. It took them a little while to find their legs, but now that Adeptus Sororitas armies have found the good combos within their index, I think we're going to see a lot more success with them unless something changes within the data slate. Now we're going to stick with Peter Burger Slam for one more list because we also saw an undefeated result from Leagues of Votann at that event. Tom Green went 4-0-1 at the event, taking only one draw on his record, but no losses, with a very Sagittor-focused variety of the army. This was running 2 Einherjar Champions, 2 units of 10 Hearthkin Warriors, a unit of 6 Brokir Thunderkin, as well as 2 units of 10 Einherjar Hearthguard, and a unit of 5 Chthonian Berserks. Those Chthonian Berserks, alongside the 2 Hearthkin Warrior units that would split up into units of 5, would then embark into the army's 5 Hylas Beam Cannon equipped Sagittors. That adds a ton of scouting to the army that then also gets backed up by the 9 Hernkin Pioneers in 3 units of 3, giving the army a ridiculous forward presence. That allows you to create lots of table space, clear out your opponent's light screening units, and drop in Einherjar Hearthguard wherever you need to solidify your control over the center of the table. This list is really the encapsulation of Leagues of Votann, just ruthless efficiency with the incredible profiles that they get for their points value. And while they are relying very heavily on judgment tokens in order to deal damage with the kind of mid-range weapons on most of the units inside this style of army, that's definitely just fine for them because they have so many units across the table that you're going to be accruing judgment tokens on yourself by destroying them just naturally without even relying on the judgment tokens that get assigned at the beginning of the game. These armies also saw a fairly good showing at LVO, and we would have seen more of them in the top 8 if they hadn't hit an unfortunate mirror match in the Shadow round to qualify players for top 8. Leagues of Votann, definitely another powerhouse faction currently, and on and off have one of the best win rates in the game, depending on the weekend. Does seem a little bit random, but they do get the results when good players show up with the army. Moving on to another faction that did not see multiple undefeated results this weekend, let's talk about NMN 40k, where Lasse Toivonen went undefeated with Death Guard. This army was running 2 Biologus Putrifiers as well as 2 Foul Blightspawn. A little bit more of anti-melee hate than we've seen recently with Death Guard armies, which typically focus on those Biologus Putrifiers to do lots and lots of mortal wounds, but only take 1 Foul Blightspawn. Those characters are attaching into some combination of the 4 units of Plague Marines in the army, 2 units of 10 and 2 units of 5. Likely double attaching thanks to the special restrictions that Fetid Virion can attach with each other into the 10-man Plague Marine squads to make them absolutely brutal to deal with. Those guys are going to embark into the army's 3 Rhinos. We have 2 Rhinos for the 10-man squads and 1 Rhino for the 2 5-man squads to jump into, and that's backed up with a lot of additional Chaos armor, including 2 Plague Burst Crawlers, 2 Fetid Bloat Drones, and the now ubiquitous 3 allied War Dogs, this time being 2 Brigands and a Carnivore, to add a little bit of additional punch into the Death Guard army. The big benefits of Death Guard, obviously, are that most of their buffs and debuffs are effective in an aura, meaning that they are most likely going to be trying to debuff enemies that are near them rather than buff their own faction units. That means that you can ally units in with impunity, and those units will benefit from the debuffs that you're applying to enemies. Following that up, we also have 3 units of Nurglings in order to score secondaries, and those can support the Fetid Bloat Drones. The Bloat Drones are great at scoring secondaries by themselves, being a relatively tanky profile for only 100 points. At a speed 10, they're one of the fastest units in the Death Guard Codex, so they can deploy aggressively, move aggressively, and your opponent probably has to overcommit to kill them if they even want to try. Now, last but certainly not least from this week, we also have an undefeated Astra Militarum list. This goes alongside Astra Militarum's relatively surprisingly good performance at Las Vegas Open, putting a list into the top 8, and I think indicates that the faction is starting to be worked out. We do see some new trends in the faction that can certainly help them with the typical Militarum problem of actually holding down the middle of the table without simply getting pushed off of the center objectives and being unable to retain them. This army was running Gaunt's Ghosts, as well as Lord Solar Leontis, a platoon command squad, a tank commander, and Ursula Creed. The combination of the platoon command squad alongside Lord Solar Leontis and Ursula Creed allows you to fire that command squad's mortar in order to use Ursula Creed's free stratagem to give that mortar +1 AP on other units that shoot its target. It can sit in the back and effectively just spotter for units that you want to destroy later on in the turn by giving yourself that AP bonus. We then had a tank commander as well to command the armor in the list, 4 units of Catachan Jungle Fighters to dominate the middle of the table with their scout moves, 1 1 unit of Death Corps of Krieg to give Lord Solar Leontis a little bit of a tougher bodyguard to join into, and following that up, we have 3 Bullgrin squads. Now, the Bullgrin squads are a relatively recent inclusion in these Militarum lists. We've seen a little bit of play with them over the last couple months, but now we're seeing 6, 9, and even 12 or more Bullgrin included in Militarum lists. The benefit of these guys is that they are ridiculously hard to kill. They bake in a feel no pain, invulnerable save, and damage reduction all together for a relatively low sub 30 point per model price point. That's incredibly efficient and gives you units that are not only passable at melee, but also difficult to kill, meaning that unlike standard guardsman squads, you're not being swept off the table by random enemy small arms. In order to support the jungle fighters, we also have a unit of Kazarkin to also add some scout moving medium infantry into the mix, 2 Manticores and a Medusa carriage battery to add some indirect fire artillery, alongside a unit of Tempestus Scions and a Calidus Asacton to act as utility deep strikers, and a Rogaldorn battle tank to blast people away in the middle of the table. What we don't see in this list that we've seen in a lot of other Astra Militarum lists is a focus on dedicated transports like Chimeras. Those are resilient and also get scout when you place a scout unit in them, being dedicated transports. However, it doesn't seem like the list really needed it. It's able to flood the middle of the table with infantry between those Kadish and jungle fighters and Kazarkin, blast it away with artillery, especially when supported by the platoon command squad's mortar being buffed by Ursula Creed, and then hold down the objectives that are cleared off by these big guns with those Bullgrin squads. And together that combined to give Martin Cooper a 5-0 record at the end of the event. And with that, those are all the best armies in Warhammer 40k for this week. Let me know down in the comment section which one's your favorite and what you think about them. Big thanks as well to Cascade Clash for supporting the channel. Go check them out in a link in the video description and pinned comment if you're looking for a competitively focused major level event in the Pacific Northwest area. Big thanks to everybody who supports the channel as well, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/tacticaltortoise, YouTube channel members, and Twitch subscribers. All you people are great and I love you. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.